Speaking to Tim Pool on Timcast IRL, Steve Deace said the following, quote, Ukraine is my last nerve, and this is hard for me to say as a kid who's a child of the 80s, who grew up in the We're America B 80s, and got up in the middle of the night to cheer Reagan bombing Gaddafi back to the Neolithic period. This is hard for me to say, okay? You're not taking my high school age son to fight and die in Ukraine. You're taking him literally over my dead body. I am never allowing that. I am never letting you take him to die for your Habsburg dynasty, World War I, needless 20 million pile of deaths replay over your elites pissing contest. Not happening. I don't care what the threat is. I don't care what the penalty is. And if you're thinking of drafting my daughters, get the camps ready because you're going to need them. Never happening. This is just an example of history doesn't just repeat, it rhymes. So I wanted to use that to go ahead and spark our dialogue regarding Ukraine, where we are at right now. Currently, Joe Biden said that he is planning on pledging another $10 million to Ukraine. So I think it's important that we discuss the implications of this war, what we think about it, how the church should be dialoguing about this war. So, Richard, I'll go ahead and go to you first as our guest of your initial reaction to Steve's rant on Timcast and any thoughts on Ukraine.
Yeah, I know Steve a little bit. I mean, I follow him like I don't know him, but yeah, I mean, I could see that sentiment. And I mean, I've got 4 kids. My oldest is 12, 3 girls and a boy. And yeah, I mean, there's certainly reasons for war. There's certainly times when I think a war has to happen or a battle or something. But really in the last few, not to get into whole, war history in the last 100 years or whatever, but the more I pay attention and the older I get, the more I'm like, I feel like I've been lied to most of my life. This is actually not, I'm actually ashamed. I actually got into an argument, so-called, that I trust Putin more than I do Biden. And of course, the person's getting all upset about it. And I'm like, that just shows you how little I trust Biden. I don't trust Putin very much, but at least I, trust him, maybe have a conversation and pick up Starbucks. I don't even think Biden could pick up Starbucks or even know what a Starbucks is. And so like, and I mean that seriously, the guy is
not well,
mentally challenged at best, and clearly is not in control and has any sort of influence whatsoever. And I don't care who there is behind him. Ultimately, there's somebody else, and 81 million people voted for him. So yeah, I think it's a proxy war, and it's something, not to go too deep on it, but for Ukraine, myself personally, anytime celebrities who live in some other planet and leftist crazies are all about, my body, my choice, I'm going to kill my baby, except for the vaccine. Now it's not. And they're going to force you to do this and change that and yell at you for not wearing a mask and all these things for the last couple of years. And then the last 12 months or so, now we just switch it. And we've seen all the memes, right? 2020 was this, 2021 was this, 2022 was this, 2023 was this. And they put the little flag and they do the thing. And these rich celebrities are like, yeah, we stand with Ukraine. And it's like, why is not everyone standing with Ukraine though? Right? Like, I don't really stand with anything all these celebrities are saying. So why in the world would I stand with them on this war, as if Russia's this horrible guy and Ukraine is such a great, like, Ukraine is full of corruption, like to the nines. Like it's 10 miles thick, the corruption. I mean, anyway, like, so I don't trust it. Again, I probably sound like a super pessimist. I'm really an optimist, glasses half full kind of guy, but it's one of those, like, okay, you do that, and I don't agree with anything you say, so I'll just do whatever the opposite of what you say. Got it. Like, that's where I'm at with Ukraine personally.
Yeah, well, anyone who knows Zach knows that he's super into foreign wars. So Zach, what was your initial reaction to Steve's tirade on Timcast?
Preach it from the mountaintops, my brother in Christ. This war in Ukraine is the reason why I'm losing hair. Okay, like I'm 28 years old, and I have lived 4 years of my life, I think maybe 6, Okay, depending on how you want to look at it, and I'm not going to go into my autistic anti-war rants. I'll keep it together this time, okay? But there has been maybe 6 years of my life where there has not been some type of conflict that the U.S. has been involved in. Either, I mean, like in this one, it's kind of a weird one, right? Because like Putin invading Ukraine, like the U.S. has like absolute, well, it's Putin bears 100% of the responsibility for invading Ukraine. And depending on, I mean, there's a whole lot of history we can go into with this war,
Yes,
but some of the, his reasonings, I guess, well, I don't even want to say that because that's not correct. But he could have gone about this diplomatically because there is some legitimacy to some of the claims to some of the regions in Ukraine that he wants. But committing war crimes and genocide is not a way to go about doing these things. I would have thought that having been in the KGB at the time of, parts of the Geneva Conventions, that Putin would know this. Certainly, going through the fall of the Soviet Union, he would have learned this, but that is not the case. And so, I mean, is it a just war? It depends on what you mean by just. But as far as I can tell, there's nothing just about committing war crimes.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, as far as the U.S.'s involvement goes, like, no, like we should not be sending money. I mean, it's like East Palestine should identify as Ukraine so they can get that aid money and fix their rail system or something like that. And it's just like, as far as the U.S. involvement goes, well, it's just like, obviously we shouldn't be sending aid to billions of dollars to Ukraine, but like, it's, you get killed, the people making fun of me for saying this more than they already do, but it's just like, the U.S. may not be directly responsible for the war in Ukraine, but like the sort of Cold War around it, they absolutely are, through, going back to the 90s with Bill Clinton expanding NATO in Eastern Europe and things like that. Really laid the groundwork for Putin's invasion.
Yeah. Michael?
Calling something a just war, I think, is it's a fairly arrogant position to have one way or another, right? Because if we want to look at it, like people say, what should Christians think about this? Okay, well, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. And that same God who says vengeance is mine, when Habakkuk, the prophet, calls out to God and says, what the heck? Why are you letting your chosen people be beat up by Babylon? I'm paraphrasing. This is the Eugene Peterson version. He says, so Habakkuk says, why are you letting your holy nation be condemned like this? And why aren't you fighting for us? Basically is his argument. And God says, who are you? I don't acknowledge your power. Like, my justice is my own, and Babylon is my judgment. So the point of this is not to make some half-baked attempt to say that Russia is the judgment of God against Ukraine. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, for us to determine the justice of what takes place on the other side of the world, I think we've got to look at our perspective from our own perspective. Is it a just war for the men and women fighting to protect their home in Ukraine? Yeah, possibly. Is it a just war for Americans to be drafted in and taken across the world over political alliances and money laundering issues? No, probably not. I think that's a guaranteed no, and I'm standing with Steve on that, is that I don't have kids, but if I did, I wouldn't have them go either. So ultimately, I do think it's funny how when it comes to foreign affairs in the realm of war specifically, there's so many contradictions in the opinions of the people. Like, think of which parties were in which positions regarding the Vietnam War, because many people hated that we were sending our boys over to Vietnam to fight not our war, and there were way too many casualties for what that accomplished. And many more would also say the same thing about the Gulf War and sending sending our troops into the Middle East, even as recently as all the Iraq nonsense of pulling out. And
Afghanistan,
yeah, sorry, that's what I meant to say. In Afghanistan, pulling out of
We can talk about
Afghanistan.
Iraq. We can go there. I got all night, kids. My
It's
whiteboard
just
is in the other room.
And I'm not trying to promote one opinion over another. I think I'm more saying that the opinions of the people who would have us believe their opinions regarding foreign policies in wartime are not motivated by justice. And they're not governed by ethics as much as they are convenience and personal gain, political gain. It's disturbing to see our president give so little attention to East Palestine, Ohio, and give so much attention and finances to Ukraine.
It's insane.
It is insane. I don't really even know what to say about that. It's disturbing.
I mean, I would say it's treasonous. I mean, there's certain levels of treason that you do get strung up and taken down, as it were. But I don't know how you can have. I mean, and again, you can get online and people's worldviews that are already shaped by whatever are probably not at all close to ours. And even any sort of even just general conservative, let alone a biblical Christian, God's in charge, etc. But like, oh well, that's just an explosion. It's well, there's problems all over the place. As if this massive chemical spill in Ohio is just kind of like, stuff happens. Now, stuff does happen, and maybe it was just a total accident, and maybe they did the best thing they could do. Maybe that's all possible. I don't think so, but anyway, for that to completely be ignored. And for Trump to show up and not have the federal government behind him, and Biden, well, okay, we'll send some stuff. And it's just like literally an hour later, it was like, yeah, we don't have time or whatever. And then Trump's like, go. And then like 60 minutes later, okay, yeah, FEMA, we can come too. And you're like, are you for real? Like, it's not even, there are some things, like I said earlier, that I think are planted. I think Kamala is she's her own thing. And I think she really is just dumb. I really don't think she's out of her league. But I think sometimes she says stuff to demean people and lower the office and really just make us look like idiots. So there's like this level of like, is this real? And did you really actually say that because you think it? Or did you say it because you're trying to cause division in like a civil war, Cold War type? Like it's Cold War where it's quiet, right? And then to then create a civil war within the ranks of blue and red states and black and white and male and female and all this stuff. I personally believe that's really what's happening in general, both with online stuff, with TikTok, with Instagram, Twitter, and all the just crazy little fires, metaphorically speaking, that pop up. And I think Ukraine is no different from that. It's just a big one over there. But for them to blatantly, like you said, Michael, completely ignore Ohio and then be like, and show up to Ukraine. It's just like, golly. I mean, you want to care for one, fine, I guess, but you're not going to care for your own people. Like,
yeah. I think from a biblical standpoint too, it's like I think that is undoubtedly immoral.
Mm-hmm. It's wicked.
I truly do believe that the Bible calls on the civil magistrates to take care of their people, to administer justice, to wield the sword on the Lord's behalf. And, I truly do think that it is disgusting to see the lack of care. But I also think you're right about that, Richard. I think that there is a push to cause infighting among our countrymen, because the reality is I think many of our politicians are bought and paid for by foreign interests who are, really wanting to see the downfall of America, or, whatever the case may be. And some of it's political expedience that drives these people. Some is just plain greed. And, it's hard to say exactly what motivates these people all the time. For myself, I would probably say that we haven't been in what we could argue as being a just war since World War II. And even that, I personally am I've become much more isolationist in terms of my beliefs on how we should handle things. John Quincy Adams said that he said he was speaking present tense as if this was an ideal that they at the time were believing in, which is we do not go abroad seeking monsters to slay. And nowadays that unfortunately was thrown out the window long ago. And there's always critiques on all of these past wars that we've been in, but and there's even critiques that I can give on World War II. But boy, the recent interventions that we've been a part of have just been,
they're so much easier. To be honest with you,
yeah,
it's so much easier with these ones.
yeah,
It's
easier
it's interesting
and messier in terms of what's actually crystal clear, right and wrong ethically. But go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, sorry. It's interesting to me to consider what is taking place in our current events in light of how it will be written in history in the next generations. Because certainly bombing Japan was probably not something everyone agreed upon during World War II. And, the response to Pearl Harbor may not have been agreed upon by everyone who was drafted. There's a way that history is written that makes us believe the way that things have taken place. Yeah. And I'm curious to see how this history will be written. Because if this is a political dispute that ends up mimicking the Cold War again, then, we're just having a pissing match, like Steve Deace was saying about world powers showing off their big shiny buttons that they can press for nuclear war.
A lot of saber rattling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But if we escalate this, if we continue to be in Ukraine's back pocket to the point where Russia actually does start a nuclear artillery against the United States, against the support of Ukraine, and if China is going to get on Russia's side, if it becomes a world war, if that's a real thing that we're looking at, then ultimately, one way or another, the United States will paint themselves as being on the right side of history and being in the right for taking action. And we will have, if we win the war and are able to keep a semblance of civil prospects the way that we have them now, then the history books will say how justified we were in engaging in order to protect the world from the Russian supremacy or whatever. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But right now, in the middle of it, is less convincing. But who knows? 50 years from now, it could be a lot different.
Yeah. Yeah. All I know is that what I think I'm bothered by too is like you said, Michael, the way that they write the history. I have no doubt that there's a group of people that want to write this as it's this clean cut, Zelensky is Winston Churchill is how he's been referred to before. And Vladimir Putin is the new Hitler, and it's just poor innocent Ukraine. And the reality is the Ukrainian government they're not even a democracy. They're saying that we're supporting them to defend democracy. They very recently have cracked down on religious freedoms in Ukraine like you wouldn't believe. And it's ridiculous that we are even pretending that, Zelensky and his government is even remotely legitimate, honestly, with the way that they run things. They are so corrupt, and that is horrible to see us sending so much of our grandchildren's money overseas just to support this pissing contest, as Steve said. I'm glad Steve said it so we can keep referencing it. But like, for example, the expansion of NATO, we did tell Russia that we would not expand NATO, and we expanded NATO. Now, granted, there's been a lot of incursions on Russia's behalf during basically all the last presidential administrations, with the exception of Trump. Trump was the only person that I think Putin wasn't sure what he was going to do reaction-wise. Whether you like Trump or not, you could say he was a wild card, and I think Putin thought so too. But either way, this has definitely been a back and forth, one corrupt regime toying with another corrupt regime, while we fund one of the two corrupt regimes. And it's unfortunate that we are in the situation where we are suffering economically to support this war. And if things keep escalating, potentially even physical danger for this war. And that's incredibly unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
But
it just sucks because there's no.
Sorry,
yeah, I was gonna say. Well, I'm real excited for that. No, but it's just unfortunate. I think there's why you see a lot of the stand with Ukraine and so much of the, you know, I guess like I would in this particular instance come down on the side of I don't think there's anything too nefarious going on, other than it's just people, I guess with the Ukrainian flags and things like that, just white knighting and whatnot. But oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. I was going somewhere with that. I derailed myself. Oh yes, I think it's unfortunate.
Zach, you said train of thought and derailment, and
right. Hey after man, I'm not known for saying the right thing at the right time. I'm known for being stupid. No, it's just unfortunate that there's no bad guy for people to latch onto. Right? We would like it to be Putin, who is obvious. I mean, the dude looks like a James Bond villain. Right, he worked for the KGB. This dude's definitely put people in the ground. Like, make no mistake, he's not a good dude, But like, he's, I mean, he's 100% responsible for invading Ukraine. Like, he's not the only party at blame. And we would like, to be poor Ukraine, but also where the circumstances different. Are you going to try to tell me that Ukraine wouldn't try to pull something like that? You know what I mean? Like, so there's all sorts of thought exercises you can go through, but it just goes to show you that there's no good guys, and we are all completely lost without Christ.